You wake up every morning and put on a mask. Not a physical one, but something far more insidious. A carefully constructed personality designed to make you acceptable, likable, successful. You go to work as the responsible professional. You come home as the agreeable partner. You socialize as the fun friend. But late at night, when all the performances are over, you lie in bed feeling empty, wondering, who am I when no one is watching? Carl Jung spent his life studying this exact question, and what he discovered will disturb you. Most people never meet their true self. They live their entire lives as actors in a play they didn't write, following a script handed to them by society, family, and fear. Jung called this false self the persona, the mask we wear to survive in the world. But he also understood that behind every mask lies an authentic self, waiting to be discovered. The problem is, finding your true self requires something most people aren't willing to do. It requires destroying the comfortable lie of who you think you're supposed to be. Today, we're going to explore Jung's map to authentic selfhood, a process he called individuation. But I warn you, once you begin this journey, you can never go back to the comfortable unconsciousness of living someone else's life. Carl Jung understood that the human psyche is far more complex than the simple conscious mind we experience daily. He mapped the psyche into distinct layers: the conscious ego, the personal unconscious containing our repressed memories and experiences, and the collective unconscious filled with universal patterns he called archetypes. But Jung's most revolutionary insight was about the persona, the social mask we develop to function in society. The persona isn't inherently bad, it's necessary for social interaction. The problem arises when we mistake the persona for our true self. Jung observed that most people become so identified with their social roles that they lose contact with their authentic nature. They become what he called one-sided, living only through the narrow bandwidth of socially acceptable qualities while repressing everything else into the shadow. This creates what Jung termed psychological inflation, an over-identification with the conscious personality at the expense of wholeness. The true self, what Jung called the self with a capital S, emerges only through the process of individuation, the conscious integration of all aspects of the psyche, including the shadow, the anima, animus, and the various archetypes. Jung believed this process was the primary task of human development, more important than external achievements or social success. Meet Alex, a 27-year-old marketing coordinator who has mastered the art of being exactly what everyone expects. At work, they're the reliable team player who never rocks the boat. With family, they're the successful child who makes everyone proud. Among friends, they're the supportive listener who never burdens others with their own problems. Alex has spent so long adapting to others' expectations that they've lost touch with their own desires, preferences, even their own voice. They can tell you what their boss wants to hear, what their parents hope for, what their friends need, but if you asked Alex what they truly want, they would stare at you blankly. This isn't from lack of intelligence or self-awareness. It's from a lifetime of psychological training that taught them their authentic self was not acceptable. As a child, Alex learned that expressing anger meant losing love, that creative pursuits were impractical, that questioning authority was disrespectful. So they buried these aspects of themselves so deeply that they now experience them only as vague dissatisfaction, chronic fatigue, and the nagging sense that they're living someone else's life. Alex represents millions of people who have become psychologically homeless, strangers to themselves, masters of adaptation but beginners at authenticity. They've achieved external success while experiencing internal emptiness, accomplished everything except the one thing that matters, knowing who they actually are. Alex's identity crisis didn't happen overnight. It was carefully constructed through years of subtle psychological conditioning. Their parents, well-meaning but unconscious of their own personas, rewarded compliance and punished authenticity. Good children don't get angry. Smart children focus on practical careers. Responsible children don't cause problems. Each message carved away another piece of Alex's authentic self until only the acceptable remnants remained visible. School reinforced these lessons. Conform to succeed, fit in to belong, don't stand out unless it's in approved ways. The educational system, designed for mass production rather than individual development, taught Alex to prioritize external validation over internal knowing. Peer groups completed the training, establishing the social rules for acceptance. Be cool but not too cool, smart but not intimidating, successful but not threatening. Jung understood that this process of persona development, while socially necessary, becomes psychologically toxic when it completely overshadows the authentic self. Alex now experiences what Jung called persona identification. They have become so merged with their social roles that they can't distinguish between who they are and who they perform being. The result is a pervasive sense of emptiness, a feeling of going through the motions without genuine engagement, and the haunting question that keeps them awake at night: if I stripped away everything I do to please others, would there be anything left? Jung identified the specific mechanism by which personas take over authentic identity, the ego's desperate need for belonging and its terror of rejection. Alex's psyche operates through what Jung called collective identification, the unconscious absorption of societal values without conscious choice or examination. Their ego has learned to scan every environment for approval cues and automatically adjust behavior accordingly. This happens so rapidly and unconsciously that Alex experiences it as their natural personality rather than learned performance. The mechanism involves several psychological processes working in concert. Repression pushes authentic impulses into the unconscious, projection attributes unwanted aspects to others, and compensation creates artificial personalities to fill the void left by rejected authenticity. Alex's psyche has developed what Jung termed auxiliary functions, secondary personalities that activate in different social contexts. The professional Alex is competent but emotionally restricted. The family Alex is dutiful but resentful. The social Alex is agreeable but exhausted. None of these versions are false exactly, but none are complete either. They're fragments of a whole self that has never been allowed to integrate. The tragic irony is that this persona-driven life, designed to ensure acceptance and success, ultimately leads to a profound sense of isolation, because no one, including Alex, ever meets the real person behind the performance. Alex's awakening began during what they later called the presentation that changed everything. Tasked with creating a marketing campaign for a product they didn't believe in, Alex found themselves staring at their laptop at 2 a.m., unable to write a single authentic word. Every phrase felt hollow, every concept felt like manipulation, every strategy felt like a betrayal of something they couldn't name. For the first time in their adult life, Alex couldn't perform. The well-oiled machine of adaptation had simply stopped working. Instead of forcing it, something made Alex pause and ask a question they'd never asked before: what would I create if I actually cared about this? The question opened a floodgate. Suddenly, Alex could see how every choice they'd made, their career, their relationships, even their hobbies, had been determined not by genuine preference, but by what seemed expected or safe. They realized they didn't know if they actually liked their job or if they just liked being good at it. They couldn't tell if they enjoyed their social circle or just felt comfortable being the person their friends needed. Most disturbingly, they weren't sure if they loved their partner or just loved being loved in return. That night, Alex made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. They would stop performing and start experimenting with being real, not dramatically, not with grand gestures, but with small acts of authenticity. They would notice when they were performing and ask, what would the real me do here? Stop and examine your own life right now. How many of your daily choices reflect your authentic preferences versus what you think you should want? When was the last time you expressed genuine anger, genuine joy, genuine disagreement? Look at your career, your relationships, your lifestyle. How much of it did you consciously choose versus unconsciously inherit or perform? Here's Jung's question for you. Who are you when no one is watching? What do you think about in your private moments that you would never share? What aspects of yourself do you edit out before showing up in the world? Jung believed that most people never answer these questions honestly because they're terrified of what they might discover. We're afraid that our authentic self might be unacceptable, unlovable, or unsuccessful. But Jung had a different perspective. He believed that the authentic self, however imperfect, is always more powerful and ultimately more attractive than any performance. Your task isn't to become someone else, it's to stop being someone else. Comment below and share one area of your life where you know you're performing rather than being authentic. Not to confess or overshare, but to practice the radical act of honest self-examination. Sometimes the journey to authenticity begins with simply naming where we've been hiding. Jung's path to authentic selfhood, which he called individuation, involves several crucial steps that Alex began to navigate with growing awareness. The first step is what Jung termed persona analysis, becoming conscious of the masks you wear and the roles you perform. Alex started noticing when they automatically shifted into performance mode, when their voice changed, when their energy shifted to accommodate others' expectations. The second step involves shadow work, reclaiming the aspects of yourself that you've rejected or hidden. Alex began to explore their suppressed anger, their abandoned creative interests, their unspoken opinions and unpopular thoughts. This wasn't about acting out every impulse, but about acknowledging and integrating these aspects consciously. The third step Jung called encountering the opposites, recognizing that you contain contradictory qualities and that wholeness comes from integration, not elimination. Alex learned to hold both their need for security and their desire for adventure, both their social nature and their need for solitude. The healing process required what Jung called holding the tension of opposites, rather than choosing one side over another. Alex worked with a therapist who understood that the goal wasn't to fix their personality but to expand it, not to choose between personas but to consciously direct them. The key insight was that authenticity doesn't mean being the same person in every situation. It means being consciously present and genuine in each moment rather than automatically reactive. 6 months into their individuation journey, Alex's life looked surprisingly similar from the outside but felt completely different from within. They still worked in marketing, but now they chose projects that aligned with their values and spoke up when asked to promote products they didn't believe in. Some colleagues found this new directness challenging, but Alex discovered that authentic professional relationships were more satisfying than performative ones. Their romantic relationship had evolved too. No longer the perfectly accommodating partner, Alex now expressed their needs, preferences, and occasional disagreements. Initially, this created tension, but ultimately it created deeper intimacy because their partner was finally meeting the real Alex rather than a people-pleasing performance. Most remarkably, Alex had begun pursuing photography again, something they'd abandoned in college because it wasn't practical. They weren't planning to become a professional photographer, but the creative expression felt essential to their well-being. Alex learned what Jung meant by psychological differentiation, the ability to respond to situations from your authentic center rather than automatically reverting to personas. They still adapted to social situations, but now it was conscious choice rather than unconscious compulsion. They could be professional at work without losing their humanity, social with friends without losing their authenticity, loving in relationships without losing themselves. Alex had discovered that the authentic self isn't a fixed personality, but a way of being present, honest, conscious, and integrated. Alex's journey reflects what Jung saw as the central psychological task of modern life, learning to live authentically in a world that rewards conformity. Jung observed that individuated people don't just improve their own lives, they contribute to the collective healing of society. When someone breaks free from unconscious role-playing, they give others permission to do the same. They become what Jung called cultural canaries, indicating what's possible when human beings prioritize authenticity over approval. Jung understood that societies filled with persona-identified individuals become rigid, fearful, and ultimately destructive because they lack the creativity and adaptability that comes from genuine human diversity. The epidemic of anxiety, depression, and meaninglessness in modern culture often stems from what Jung called persona exhaustion, the psychological cost of maintaining performances that don't align with authentic nature. But Jung also saw hope. Each person who commits to their own individuation process creates ripple effects that encourage others' authenticity. They model the possibility of being successful without sacrificing selfhood, of being social without being false, of being responsible without being self-abandoning. The person who has found their true self becomes a beacon for others who are still lost in their personas, demonstrating that authenticity is not only possible but ultimately more satisfying than any performance. The individuation process is not a destination, but a lifelong practice that requires constant consciousness and courage. Alex still catches themselves slipping into automatic personas, especially during stressful periods or when facing rejection or criticism. The difference now is that these relapses feel uncomfortable rather than natural, providing immediate feedback about when they're abandoning their authentic center. Alex developed what they call authenticity check-ins, regular moments throughout the day when they pause and ask, "Am I being real right now, or am I performing?" This practice helps them distinguish between conscious adaptation and unconscious performance. The ongoing challenge is learning to handle the social consequences of authenticity. Not everyone appreciates real honesty, genuine emotion, or authentic expression. Some relationships end when Alex stops playing familiar roles. Some professional opportunities disappear when they refuse to compromise their values. But Jung understood that these losses are part of the individuation process. As you become more authentic, you naturally attract people and circumstances that align with your true nature, while releasing those that were only compatible with your persona. The goal isn't to be authentic in ways that are destructive or insensitive, but to be consciously present and genuine rather than unconsciously reactive and false. The question, who is the real you, isn't philosophical, it's practical. Every day you don't spend as your authentic self is a day of your life lost to performance. Every relationship built on personas rather than authenticity is a connection with your mask, not your heart. Every achievement earned through being who you think you should be, rather than who you are, is an accomplishment for someone who doesn't exist. Jung understood that finding your true self isn't about discovering some hidden perfect personality. It's about integrating all the parts of yourself that you've split off and learning to live consciously rather than automatically. It's about reclaiming your anger, your creativity, your questions, your preferences, all the aspects of yourself that you learned were unacceptable. Starting today, I challenge you to begin your own individuation process. Notice when you're performing versus being authentic. Pay attention to which aspects of yourself you edit out in different social contexts. Ask yourself, what would I do if I weren't afraid of judgment? What would I choose if I weren't trying to please anyone? Who would I be if I stopped trying to be who I think I should be? In the comments below, share one way you know you've been living inauthentically. Not to confess or seek advice, but to practice the courage of honest self-examination. Subscribe if you want to continue exploring Jung's insights into the journey of becoming who you truly are. Because the world doesn't need another perfect performance. It needs your authentic presence, your real voice, your genuine contribution. The true you has been waiting your entire life for this moment, the moment you finally decide to meet yourself.